Describe some of the differences and or similarities in being an instructional designer for a high school versus a college.
There's quite a few similarities. I think there's, by default, a lot more variation in the activities with some of the high school jobs that I've done, but partly because a part of my role is technology integration, innovative instruction, those kind of things. So a part of our purpose for developing those online classes, or mostly they're blended classes at the high school level, was because the technology enabled us to do something or enhance what we were doing in that online environment versus what was being done face-to-face. Whereas thus far at Wright State, most of what I'm doing is creating a fairly parallel class online to what's done traditionally in a classroom.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of lecture, presentation, quizzes, with some discussions, online, discussion boards put in. So in general, there's quite a bit alike, a bit more innovative stuff, but that the teachers I was working with at the high school level too were the kind of leading edge kind of teachers, the ones that were trying to do something above and beyond typical.
So do you think do you find it difficult to design a class that's supposed to be online, but you're making it essentially the same way as a lecture class or in-person class?
Yeah. I mean, if you just want to recreate the traditional lecture test environment online, it's not hard.
All right. You don't find
it's not exciting for the students. It's not. I don't think it's great pedagogy. Yeah. It's not, great teaching and learning.
All right.
But it's not hard to do.
Yeah, I asked that question because from experience, just taking the class online with the teacher and having the same professor in the classroom. Yeah. It's like the exact same thing.
I've taken a couple, since I started with Wright State, I've taken an online course and a couple of classes, like short certification type classes. I had one of each. One that was basically parallel to traditional classroom instruction online with, watch for 30 minutes.
All right.
Answer some questions, not all that engaging. Another one that was okay, but it basically was, it used discussion posts, but they were like almost a paper,
right.
A one-page type paper each post, and it's really not what a discussion forum is. It's meant to be shorter pieces, and then took one that actually was on Quality Matters certification, which is a national standard organization with national standards for high quality online instruction. It may not be terribly innovative, but there's just a way to make sure that key components are there to help students be successful, to successfully get through the course.
Okay.
And that one obviously was written pretty well because it's a model of what they're trying to get us peer reviewers to be able to see.
Oh, yeah.
And if we see things missing in a course we're reviewing, make specific suggestions to improve them.
Okay. Could you describe your typical day at Wright State?
Really, not too many typical days. When you came in today, just kind of talking, it's been kind of a quiet day, and it's almost unnerving sometimes when it's really quiet. I mean, gosh, some typical kind of things I do. I'll take like a tier 3 or tier 4 from the CATS help desk if they have a faculty or a student with an issue within Pilot. They'll do the basic stuff, but occasionally they'll get into a question or problem they can't handle, and they'll kind of escalate it to me. So do those now and then. Faculty that are having problems configuring something within Pilot, helping them with uploading test questions, test banks from textbook publishers. Working with some faculty that are doing specific things in Pilot. I have a design project right now to do an online abnormal psychology class. So I've been touching base with her. We've already come up with a plan on what we need to do, when it needs to be done by, to produce a really good quality course for next summer. So consulting with faculty on that, just a lot of variation. Sometimes they're meetings organizational for us, some planning for projects we're working on, but there's no cut and dry.
Uniform day. Like,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there are days that it is where I don't have much control over my time most of the day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm at the will of others and meetings and those kind of things. And there's other days that I have quite a bit to do, but I kind of get to guide my way through the day.
Okay.
So, but yeah, they're not. The atypical day is typical.
All right. Describe your design process.
Primarily, when working with faculty to take courses online, want to start with all of the learning objectives. What are the course objectives? So basically, it's a reverse or backwards design, where you are defining what you want your students to know and take with them when the course is over, and design backwards from there. So you're saying, okay, and a part of that helps ensure that you have excellent alignment from your first activity through that last assessment in the course.
How do you measure the success of your course or courses? Or can you measure it?
Yeah, I mean, generally we want to work here with stuff we're doing towards quality matters standards, which are fairly high, but not excruciatingly high. And it's really just to make sure that those courses are complete, that the students have everything that they need, the expectations are clear, the learning objectives are clear, that they're aligned, the assessments are aligned, the activities are aligned to those learning objectives for the course. So I guess a measure of satisfaction for me, when I would say success, is the course engaging all the way through for students. I mean, that's really why I enjoy being involved in this, is to try to make good learning experiences.
That's a great answer.
Because that's really where it needs to be. Because like I said, in the past 10 months, I've taken 3 different online courses, and very different. The last one was the right amount of rigor, right amount of tough, but it also was interesting, and there was a variety of things that we did. But I enjoyed doing it, and I got a lot out of it. And it's one of those things I didn't at all dread.
Okay.
Like some of the, like I said, the one-page discussion posts that were really short papers.
All right.
Were.
There's a few of those still floating around now.
So, I would say a successful course is one that is complete, well-aligned, and engaging for the students. And obviously, within reason, very, to where there's a considerable amount of interaction between the teacher and the students and one another.
All right. Could you describe some of the changes in technology and how these changes have affected the way you design your course?
Most technologies I'm working with here I've used in the past. There's some things I'd like to see used more that don't get used more, and part of that's just the faculty's not familiar with them. So it's one, and a lot of times their design timelines are ambitious, and for them to be learning something significant in the midst of it is probably not going to happen.
All right.
So as far as changes in technology, I mean, there's a lot of flexibility, interactivity with technology beyond having an online class that has just lectures or recorded presentations, has some traditional print materials that are just in a digital form, discussion forums, quizzes, and exams. I mean, we have Pilot Live, which is Illuminate, also known as Blackboard Collaborate, that can be set up instead of being a synchronous tool for the teacher to have a virtual class, to one where you can set that up for a group of students and they can use that as a group meeting place for them. So some of those things I really think are cool, but it's one of those getting faculty to realize them as being learning tools and not teaching tools.
Right.
So it's handing those over to the students is probably a good way of putting it.
It's handing them over to the students.
Yeah. Giving the students clear objectives, giving
Right.
them the ability to meet synchronously, but in different places. To collaborate and to work together.
Okay. What additional changes do you anticipate in the near future, and how will these changes affect your role as an instructional designer?
Within Wright State with our provost, he's very attuned to moving content online for the university to get experience, to expand the reach of the university. So I see that it's going to play a bigger role within Wright State. We have a couple of projects underway. One of them is taking a couple of large bottleneck gen ed courses that typically, once those are opened, they fill very quickly. They tend to be 200 plus student classes. To take a couple of those initially online, so the students have the option: do I take it face to face in the big lecture hall, or do I want what we hopefully will be helping provide a more personalized and individualized approach to those same large impersonal courses. So those are things that are influencing us. The university has a partnership that they're working to develop an online cybersecurity master's degree, and that is to take from currently very little of the resources of that online to be an entirely online program in short order.
Oh, there.
So there's some initiatives. These are just recent developments within the university within the past 6 weeks, 8 weeks, that will affect our role, because the instructional designers here are more actively involved in helping manage some of those projects and the pieces, the components of those projects. So
you guys will be a lot busier than with the inclusion of the. Okay.
Very much so, because we're doing what we have always been doing, plus this.
Right.
There's not setting aside of anything that we traditionally have done. It is in addition. So, and there's some growth in staff to support that, but it's the ramp up.
All right.
That's exciting for us.
All right. What type of role do you think instructional designers will play in education in the next 10 years?
Hopefully, I guess this is the optimistic side, hopefully that a great deal of traditional classes, everything will be revised with the help of an instructional designer to hopefully develop things that are more student-centric, that are more, at least higher ed, driven by more specific standards. I think universities are going to have to find ways to cater to students that are more flexible, more affordable. And being an instructional designer is going to enable to make those courses, online, flexible, more affordable. Instructional designers are going to need to be a part of that, because I think there are some that would just say, just take it, mimic the traditional face-to-face environment online, and there are others that are saying, wait a minute, this is the opportunity for us to go through and build high-quality classes.
All right.
And because we're putting forth the effort to move them to a hybrid, blended, or entirely online, and this is the time to make them better.
Yes, I agree.
Because the students, because if they're not well done, the students will choose face-to-face.
All right. I agree with that totally. On a personal level, I totally agree. What is your personal take related to the needs of instructional designers? Like, what do instructional designers need to be equipped with to be?
Obviously they need to be well versed, and the tools are available as far as how to assess students, how to create courses that are well aligned and focused, and I would hope that they would also be able to, like one of the courses I'm working on designing right now, the only way I can get the instructor to think currently is weeks.
Is weeks?
Weeks. To divide the content up into weeks.
Okay.
And she's struggling a bit between the summer semester, which is shorter than her fall, spring semester, not a lot shorter, but just with the content and the difference of a couple of weeks. And it's like, really, with an online course, you're not so bound by a week. Because a week is divided into 2 or 3 class meetings, but those are face-to-face structure, if you will. And it's like, what you really need to look at is look at your content and find logical, concepts that all work together, that are interrelated, and make that a module, and not worry about. But those are some of the things that I don't know. I guess a part of it is helping educate traditional instructors that they're not as tightly bound to some traditional constraints that they've had. I mean, like the idea of a class meeting, the idea of a week of content, a semester,
So I think that leads to, like, my next question is, what are some major obstacles you face in doing your job?
Let me go back to that one, and then I'll let you get to that one. Okay. I guess one of the key things is that you need to have good interpersonal skills, because they're going to be doing a bit of a sales job, if you will, trying to get people to understand why they would want to do something that coming into it they may not have. Why would I want to not go by chapters in the book? Why do I not want to go by weeks of work?
So you got to kind of like win them over to your side.
So you need some interpersonal skills. You need to have a little bit of a salesperson kind of, not an aggressive, obnoxious salesperson.
Right.
But to help them understand the value of setting aside those boundaries, those, containers, I guess, that they're used to.
Does it work? Does it work more?
I haven't been at it long enough here with my K-12 counterparts. A lot of those people were ready to let go of that stuff. Oh, okay. So it was pretty easy. I was facilitating their wishes. And not too much convincing other than like principles. They were harder. But basically they were saying, well, let's get it done. They were not, okay, anyway, move on. That was just something that is kind of important, because you are really a change agent. It's not just a new medium of instruction. You're trying to...
change agent.
Yeah. You're trying to hopefully improve instruction and make it more student-centric, student-friendly, while at the same time being physically farther from the student.
So what are some of the major obstacles you face in doing your job? Would that be the change agent or the trying to sell it?
Yeah, I think quite a few of the folks I work with here are adjuncts and instructors and lecturers, so they're not full faculty. But many aspire to that. But they also seem to be fairly eager to do a good job. Because they see this as a stepping stone to where a goal that they have. So which is kind of exciting, because they're more open to some of these ideas and everything. And I know that by working with them, it's influencing the future of higher education by doing that, because they will become the assistant professors of the future. And move through the tenure track. So. So where are we on the obstacles?
Yeah.
So I think one of them is that there are plenty of people that contractually do not have to change. Their academic freedom, and basically they may do as they wish, as they see fit to provide the instruction. And there are no carrots, to
dangle
in front of them. And some of them too have their teaching is secondary to their love of the process of science, the process of research, and those kind of things as well. So
it's hard to try to get those type of professors or instructors to switch or to come over to the
and also a lot of them don't have a deep background in teaching and learning classes and pedagogy and those kind of things. You know, they learn to teach by teaching, and they tend to teach like how they were taught, and they don't tend to read a lot of educational research. You know,
I wonder how they can stay abreast of like what's going on if they're not.
But they're not required to. Their audience is fairly captive, right? Especially if it's a course that students have to take.
Right. Okay.
You know, and as long as they do an adequate job, everything moves on.
Okay.
So, whereas I think that's going to change. You talk about what does technology do? That's going to bring pressures that didn't exist before. Because if you take a bottleneck course that has 400 students that take it, then you make an online course that's more interesting, engaging, flexible. That course that's used to being full and overflowing will no longer be full and overflowing. And if you provide an alternative to that, that is a good one, you just created a level of competition.
All right.
And you could drain the 400-seat lecture hall.
Or force them to convert.
Right. You know, or some of them may be relieved that they no longer have.
Right. You know? It's that too. It's that.
Yeah. But I think that's going to cause those things to happen and the people to assess the impact of it.
So really it's just time, pretty much. Is that time change? You think time would change, like some of the obstacles that's in your way, or some of the resistance that you're getting from, like you're saying, people that don't have to adhere to anything. You know.
Or they don't see the value in it.
Right.
You know, if they saw a value in it, they may have a different perspective. That's going back to that whole sales kind of thing. But some folks are very comfortable. When I was teaching, I inherited notes and materials for biology. I started in 91. January of 91. And the one high school teacher that retired gave me materials that were typed and dated in the early 60s, before I was born. And that was the materials that he was using to teach in 1990.
Oh, and he recommended that you follow suit?
No, he just said, here, this is what I use. Because he was retiring and he no longer had a need for it, and that was how he was
getting rid of it. Huh?
Yeah. So.
All right. What do you like most about being an instructional designer?
I told you there's not a typical day, which means there's a lot of variety, and I like that. You get some folks that are really interested in pushing the envelope and doing cool and innovative things, and I like helping them do that. So, that's an exciting piece. There's some other technologies that I help support as well, which is one of them is Blackboard Collaborate, Pilot Live is what we call it, which is that online learning environment, which is neat for classroom type stuff. But it's, like I said, if you take one of those rooms and you make it not a room where there's a teacher talking to the students, but you have groups that are using that room and pure facilitating, that's neat. A piece outside of this are the clickers, student response system, which have some use across the university but still are not widespread. And having worked with a couple of faculty in the rooms with them, I was surprised that the students came up to me and thanked me for helping that happen, because they'd like to be able to contribute something and to get some feedback on how they were doing and what they knew. So the students saw value in that. That, like I said, the first time that happened, I was a little taken back. It's like, okay, I'm just here to help. And you're over here, taking the time out of this big room, and I've got 7 or 8 students thanking me, and that's like, well, that's cool, but but that's meaning. I mean, I guess that gives me feedback that is responding to the students' needs and creating instruction that is more student-centric, which is really what I want to do.
All right.
So.
All right. You talked about a change agent and being a salesperson or having a sales pitch in a way. Could you give some recommendations or tips for effective and harmonious teamwork with teachers and other instructional designers from your experience?
Or
have you ever ran into a situation where it just couldn't happen? Like you and another person just could not make it happen.
I've ran into a few of those, and that was in K-12. A lot of times it was principals that were very set in their way, and they're used to basically having their way. And so I basically had to try to give them some seeds of why, the value of this and everything, and then try to create situations for them to change their own mind.
Okay. So pretty much let them
lead them to the conclusion I want them, which is a kind of a teaching strategy too. As a science teacher, generally I wanted them to go through a process scientifically to evaluate evidence, data, make informed decision and come to a conclusion.
All right.
So, sometimes I would do that. I was in a couple of situations where there was just it was hard because they really wanted to cling steadfastly to bad practices, ineffective practices, that it's one of those things like, all right, you really shouldn't be doing this. But I'm required to help you do this, so, sometimes just bite your lip and you kind of help them do that.
All right.
And every opportunity you can, try to show them more engaging things they could do, or to try to expose them in hopes that down the road at some point.
Have you ever had one of those professors or teachers come back later that was standoffish to come back later?
I've had a few, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was back when I was working K-12, and it was where we're doing workshops where everyone had to attend. Most of the workshops I did, typically people volunteered, so at least they were interested in whatever it was. But it's not like going to an electronic grade book. There were several districts where I trained every single teacher, K-12, how to use an electronic grade book. And when I was doing that, I had been using one personally for over a decade.
All right.
11 or 12 years. So I understood the value in everything. And there were some of them that were, the paper and pencil, there's nothing better than the calculator and everything. And had a few where, they go through and they get through a term or a couple of terms and realize at the end of the term that there are no hours of calculating grades. There's a few minutes.
All right.
And that's it. And then being able to open that up to the students, where the students can also see how they are doing on a regular basis, and seeing the power of that and motivating the students and making them interested in their progress. So, yeah, and it's kind of neat when they come back.
And then you're not so crazy after all.
Yeah, and those situations where I was as a regional entity for the state, so they had to kind of seek out how to contact me and let me know that. And that was, sometimes I was back in their district and they ran across me, like one of them running out in the hall after me, and that was kind of cool.
Well, that made you feel kind of good, huh?
Yeah, it was like kind of hunt me down. And a few I got via email or phone call.
Yeah.
So when you did the training, you said this, I was like, and it's like, now that I've been through this, I get it.
All right, and I love it.
Yeah.
All right, what advice would you give to someone interested in becoming an instructional designer?
Got to be good with working with people. Got to be patient. Because your job at times is being a teacher too. And when I say that, you're trying to help them to design courses, good quality courses that are engaging for students, that where everything's well aligned to those learning objectives for the course, to create good assessments, to hopefully try things that they may not have known existed, take time to learn about the Quality Matters rubric. And the reason for that is really is
that you saying quality matters?
Quality matters, yeah.
Okay. I got matters.
Matters because it will give you the idea of some key components of high quality online classes.
Okay.
Like the instructor needs to introduce themselves to the class, give some background information to try to connect with those classes, even though physically they're not together. And how to contact them and what to expect as far as communications with the instructor, the resources that the students need for that class, the resources that the university provides for student support, whether it's tutoring services, disability services, what have you, library services, those kind of things. So by learning about the Quality Matters rubric and taking the peer reviewer class, it just gives you a very good idea of what constitutes a good quality online class, all the key components, that things are aligned. Also requires that you be able to give good, specific, constructive feedback. So if there's a piece of their course that's unclear, incomplete, or missing, a part of the process of the peer reviewer class is to get you to write concise, focused, generally positive, let's say balanced, feedback to improve their courses. And that I think that's very worthwhile. Because there are things that you may look at a course and you may, this is all great and everything. However, it may be missing. You don't. It helps you know what you may be missing from a course, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I think those are some key pieces.
All right.
I think it's good too if you have some exposure to both very good classes and downright crappy classes.
Oh, yeah.
So you can kind of see the pieces, the components that make up those.
Oh, as an instructional designer, you mean?
Yeah.
You should see. Okay.
Yeah. And like I said, that Quality Matters helps. But having seen a couple of very high quality classes, I can see the next time I work through how it will help me working with faculty to develop them.
All right. Are there any questions that you wish I asked you? Or is there anything you want to just elaborate on that I should walk away with, or any words of wisdom or guidance?
Yeah. I mean, the instructional designer, I guess, is something I've learned more recently. There's kind of different environments that you're involved in that. Sometimes it's pretty simplistic and they're like trainings and workshops, more in the corporate world. Mm-hmm. Instructional designer, maybe just simply doing updated knowledge for new employees, new staff. Obviously higher ed, we're working not just on single courses. We're getting involved with now whole programs, to help with that. So there's a variety, of things. My background really, probably the best background has been smaller stuff, was designing workshops, doing these professional development programs for districts, but for the most part, those tend to be, the amount of time invested by the learners, 3, 6, 8, 15, 45 contact, hours in the class, max. So there's that. I guess there's a lot of variety, and there's some people that'll be more, find it more enjoyable to do the big, long, whole program type thing, and others to do just short pieces.
So which one do you prefer? Bouncing back and forth?
So far, I kind of like the kind of projects that are just a couple of months, a few months, so you can see the progress through, but you can also see the end of the.
Other course.
Yeah, because I always like to say sometimes when we interview people, I've helped on a couple of committees, and we're getting ready to do a couple more. Is how to react to reasonable deadlines and sometimes slightly unreasonable, and occasionally entirely unreasonable deadlines.
And then how do you react?
Yeah.
What would be the answer to that?
Well, some of the slightly unreasonable deadlines are fine because they're challenges. Can we get this done? The unreasonable ones, you just have to be resourceful and prioritize.
Right.
And get creative. I think that the thing I like about the unreasonable deadlines is you have to be ruthlessly creative to get to some of those points.
All right.
And sometimes you may say, okay, this is what we can deliver by this date. We can start delivering this. We have the first 6 weeks done. This is supposed to be 10 weeks. This is more K-12 type stuff. But if we get the first 6 weeks done and polished, as we approach the deadline, we're ready to start. We've got the first half done. So within the first 3 weeks, can we get that last chunk?
So like when you design a program like in college or university, like when you designing a program for that, you just do it?
All I've done is courses.
Oh, just courses.
We just started doing, or at least I've just become more involved in. We're becoming more involved with something beyond just a course.
Okay.
So
you do the whole course, like for the whole semester? You speaking like a course, like in like a whole entire class, like you do that. So when you sit down and do it, do you do the entire course in one setting, or do you do half of it, or do some of it?
Yeah, the two that I've been involved with, I try to get the bigger picture stuff done up front.
Okay.
Where they have instructional goals, that kind of stuff, and then break it down into modules.
Okay.
Or with this abnormal site, we're working with 2 or 3 weeks at a time.
Okay.
And basically, we want to get those few weeks, get the objectives for that fewer weeks done first, because then that should allow us to develop the activities and the content and resources and the assessments to line up with that. So it's doing kind of a mini, you have the whole course, you break it into modules. Within each module, you do your learning objective first, and then you take what content do you have or do you need? What are your activities and resources? You're going to have discussions. Is there going to be group work? Are they going to write papers? Those kind of things. And I kind of like doing that because, you can watch the progress on those chunks.
Right.
And you have a sense of accomplishment when you finish the first unit or the first module.
All right. That's all the questions I have for you today, and I appreciate your time.